The storm outside rattled the windows as Naomi whispered, "I never agreed to this." Her chest tightened, the weight of betrayal pressing like chains. She stared at the wedding gown, her sister's scent clinging to the silk. Her mother's voice earlier echoed in her ears, cold and unyielding. "You will marry him in your sister's name." Naomi's fists clenched, her dignity crumbling beneath family duty. Marcus, the blind millionaire, waited downstairs, unaware of the deception. Naomi's tears burned, but she swallowed them, fearing they would ruin the makeup forced onto her face. Her heart screamed rebellion while her body moved like a puppet. She imagined his touch, his blindness piercing deeper than sight ever could. Shame and fear blended in her chest, twisting her breath into ragged sobs. Every step she took toward the door felt like stepping into a grave. "God help me," Naomi whispered, her voice cracking like broken glass. The walls felt like prison bars, and the silence of the house pressed louder than thunder. She knew this was not just a wedding, it was a sacrifice of her soul. The heavy doors creaked as Naomi entered the grand hall, the scent of roses too sweet, suffocating her lungs. Guests turned, whispers rising like smoke. Her sister's absence weighed on her like a stone. Naomi whispered, "I am a lie." The chandeliers burned gold above, but the light felt cruel against her skin. Marcus stood at the altar, tall and broad, his sightless eyes searching the air as though sensing her hesitation. He looked unshaken, commanding even in darkness. Naomi's mother gave a sharp nod from the front row, her silent command echoing louder than words. Naomi's legs shook beneath the weight of silk and expectation. She felt her voice rise inside, but her lips stayed sealed. This was no union of love, only of deceit. Marcus tilted his head slightly, sensing her uneven breathing. "You are nervous," he said, his deep voice calm but piercing. Naomi's hands trembled as she forced a nod, though he could not see. She thought of her sister, free somewhere beyond these walls, untouched by this prison of vows. Her chest tightened as Marcus's fingers brushed hers lightly, the touch scorching her skin with both fear and unexpected tenderness. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a desperate drum, and she wanted to scream the truth, yet silence chained her lips. The priest's voice echoed, but Naomi barely heard it. All she heard was her own pulse, heavy and loud, drowning her in shame and confusion. The priest's voice thundered, calling for vows, but Naomi's words snagged in her throat. Marcus said calmly, "I vow to cherish, even in darkness." The hall fell silent, his words heavy with unshakable strength. Naomi's lips parted, but no sound came. Her mother's sharp eyes pierced her from the front row, her gaze commanding compliance. Naomi finally whispered, "I do," the words tasting like ash on her tongue. Her knees quivered as if her body tried to betray her heart. She longed to run, but chains of duty rooted her where she stood. The rings gleamed in the priest's hands like shackles. Naomi's fingers trembled as Marcus slid the band onto her, his touch deliberate, tender, and final. The audience erupted into polite applause, but to Naomi it sounded like mockery. She felt her chest cave in as though the walls collapsed around her. Her sister's shadow lingered in every flicker of candlelight. Marcus's lips curved faintly as if sensing victory, but Naomi felt only the sting of loss. She whispered to herself, "This is not my life. This is my prison." The storm outside roared louder, its thunder echoing her silent cry. The carriage wheels rattled as Naomi sat beside Marcus, her hands folded tight in her lap, her heart aching with silent screams. Marcus said, "You are quiet." His blind gaze turned toward her, his expression unreadable yet probing. Naomi forced a thin smile, her lips trembling with a truth she dared not share. The night outside blurred through raindrops, every shadow whispering her betrayal. Her mother's earlier warning still clawed at her chest. "Keep your silence or lose everything." Naomi whispered faintly, "I am only tired." Marcus leaned back, his presence heavy yet oddly comforting, his voice softer now. "Tired hearts need rest, not silence." Naomi looked away, her reflection fractured in the dark carriage window, a stranger staring back at her. She wanted to rip off the gown and run into the storm, yet her body stayed rooted, chained to lies. The mansion loomed as the carriage stopped, its stone walls rising like a fortress against the storm. Naomi shivered as Marcus extended his hand, steady and commanding. She hesitated, her palms sweating before placing it in his. "I can manage," she muttered, her pride lacing every syllable. Marcus replied, "Even strength allows a hand to guide." His words unsettled her, soft yet piercing, as though he saw deeper than sight ever could. The servants bowed in silence, their eyes darting, sensing tension heavy in the air. Naomi's gown dragged across marble floors, each step echoing like a drumbeat of fate. She felt the house swallowing her whole, its golden chandeliers mocking her despair. In the hall's mirror, she caught her reflection again, a bride of deception, faceless behind duty. The dining room glowed with candles, their flames flickering against crystal glasses and silver plates. Naomi sat rigid, appetite vanished, her eyes darting between untouched food and Marcus's calm posture. He said evenly, "Do you always eat so silently?" His tone carried no accusation, only curiosity, but Naomi's chest tightened. "I am not hungry," she replied, forcing composure. Marcus tilted his head, his blind gaze fixed where her face might be. "Hunger is more than food." Naomi's fork trembled in her hand, the weight of unspoken truth heavier than the meal. She longed to confess everything, yet her throat locked like steel. She whispered to herself, "Unheard, if only you knew." The storm rattled outside, each thunderclap echoing her silent torment. Later, in the private quarters, Naomi stood by the window, the storm reflecting in her eyes. Marcus's voice broke the silence, deep yet tender. "Do you fear me, Naomi?" Her body stiffened, her lips trembling before she replied, "I fear everything." He stepped closer, his movements careful, deliberate, his presence a shadow yet a flame. "Fear fades when trust is built," he said calmly. Naomi turned her back to him, hiding her tears as rain pounded against glass. She thought of her sister, free of chains, and herself trapped in silk and shadows. She whispered so faintly it nearly vanished, "How can I trust when my whole life is a lie?" Marcus tilted his head, as though he heard more than words, his silence pressing deeper than thunder. The fire crackled in the hearth, its warmth mocking Naomi's cold heart. She sat on the edge of the bed, her gown heavy against her skin. Marcus stood nearby, his hand tracing the carved wood of the chair, his voice low. "I do not need eyes to feel storms inside people." Naomi froze, her breath caught. He moved closer, the air shifting with his nearness. "You are not who they said you are," he whispered, his words cutting into her soul. Naomi's tears finally fell, her silence the only confession she could give. The storm outside raged louder, as though the heavens knew her secret was a ticking clock. She buried her face in her hands, praying he would never touch her truth. Yet his nearness promised he already had. The morning sun cut through heavy curtains, gilding the mansion in false warmth. Naomi sat by the window, her braids loose, her eyes swollen from sleepless tears. Marcus entered quietly, his cane tapping against marble. "You did not rest," he said calmly, though his voice carried weight. Naomi clenched her jaw, whispering, "Rest is for the free." His blind gaze turned toward her, sharper than eyes could be. "You hide storms," he murmured, "but I hear thunder in your silence." Naomi's hands trembled against the sill, the truth clawing up her throat. She wanted to shout that she was not the sister he believed her to be. Yet she turned away, pressing her forehead against cold glass, trapped between shame and fragile hope. At breakfast, the silence broke under Marcus's voice. "You carry someone else's grief," he said, his tone measured. Naomi's spoon clattered against porcelain, her heart hammering. She forced a smile, whispering, "You imagine too much." Marcus leaned forward, his blind eyes unwavering. "Imagination does not make hands tremble. Truth does." Naomi's throat tightened, her chest aching beneath the weight of hidden lies. She wanted to run from the table, but Marcus' presence bound her in place. He reached for his cup, calm and deliberate, yet every movement radiated unspoken command. Naomi's silence stretched, her hunger consumed by fear, her heart whispering confessions she could not speak aloud. Later in the garden, Naomi walked among roses, her fingers brushing petals like fragile truths. Marcus followed slowly, guided by his cane yet unshaken. "The scent of roses hides thorns," he said softly, his tone almost wistful. Naomi's chest tightened, her voice breaking. "Some thorns cut deeper than blood." He turned toward her, his expression unreadable, his presence magnetic. "You bleed silence," Marcus said, his words heavy. Naomi's hands froze midair, her heart spiraling between fear and longing. She wished he could not sense her lies, wished his blindness truly blinded him. But his every word pierced like a knife of knowing. She whispered, "I cannot escape this garden," her tears burning as the storm of her truth rose higher. That evening, Naomi's mother arrived unannounced, her sharp presence slicing through the hall. She smiled coldly, whispering, "You are playing your role well." Naomi's heart collapsed under her words, her fists curling tight. Marcus entered, sensing the tension. "Guests arrive like shadows," he said calmly, his tone carrying weight. Naomi's mother straightened, her gaze sharp, masking her lies with polished grace. "I only came to ensure my daughter thrives." Naomi's chest burned at the word daughter, her voice breaking. "I am not thriving, I am suffocating." Her mother's eyes flared, but Marcus tilted his head as though hearing every fracture in her heart. Naomi wanted to collapse into honesty, but silence again claimed her. The night deepened as Naomi retreated to the library, shadows swallowing her. Books lined the walls, but she found no escape in their silence. Marcus entered softly, his steps measured, his voice a low ember. "Truth hides in places even blindness can see." Naomi's chest ached as she whispered, "If you knew me, you would despise me." He moved closer, his blind gaze steady, his hand brushing the spines of books. "I know storms when I feel them. I know pain when I hear it." Naomi's tears spilled freely now, her strength crumbling. She whispered, "I am not who you think I am." The words barely reached him, swallowed by the heavy silence, yet his stillness told her he already knew. The evening storm rattled the mansion as Naomi paced the corridor, her heart suffocating in her chest. Marcus sat near the fire, his hands folded with unsettling calm. He said, "Your silence grows heavier each day." Naomi froze, her breath jagged. "I have nothing to confess," she whispered, though her voice cracked under its own weight. Marcus tilted his head, his blind eyes unblinking. "You do not wear her name well." Naomi's blood froze as if lightning struck her bones. "What do you mean?" she stammered, clutching the banister for balance. His words dropped like stones into the silence. "You are not the woman they said you were." The truth trembled on her lips, but fear sealed them shut. Naomi's mother entered, her heels striking the marble like thunder. She smiled faintly at Marcus, then turned to Naomi with a cutting stare. "Do not falter now," she said softly, yet her words dripped like poison. Marcus's expression hardened. "You push her to be someone she is not." Naomi's chest caved under their voices clashing like swords. "Stop," she cried, her tone breaking, but her mother hissed, "Keep your silence." Naomi's heart screamed louder than her voice. She felt exposed, a fragile thread unraveling in front of the man she deceived. Marcus stood, his presence commanding. "I will not build a life on lies," he declared, his voice steady as stone. The tension fractured as Naomi's sister Elena appeared, her perfume filling the room before her words did. "I never wanted this life," Elena said, her tone both sharp and trembling. Naomi's knees nearly buckled, her sister's betrayal spilling into the open air. Marcus turned toward the voice, his blind eyes narrowing. "So the ghost speaks." Naomi gasped, clutching her chest. Elena's lips curled into a smirk, though her eyes betrayed unease. "I was never meant to be his wife," she said coldly. Naomi whispered, "You left me to carry your chains." The silence afterward burned deeper than fire, each second a blade cutting through their fragile bond. Naomi's voice cracked like shattered glass. "I never chose this lie. I was forced into your name." Elena scoffed, folding her arms, her words dripping venom. "You always wanted what was mine." Marcus stepped forward, his jaw tense. "What was yours to abandon cannot be claimed." Naomi's tears spilled freely now, her chest heaving under the crushing weight of betrayal. Her mother turned away, her silence darker than thunder. Naomi's cry filled the hall, a confession torn from her soul. "I am Naomi, not Elena." The words echoed like a breaking spell, every secret now exposed to firelight and storm. Silence crashed after Naomi's confession, heavier than the storm outside. Marcus's lips parted slowly, his voice carrying both ache and restraint. Truth cuts sharper than lies. Naomi fell to her knees, her sobs shaking the marble beneath her. Elena turned, her heels striking like daggers as she stormed away. Their mother stood motionless, her mask of control crumbling at the edges. Marcus's blind gaze lingered on Naomi, his voice steady yet raw. "You gave me honesty at last, even if wrapped in pain." Naomi lifted her face, trembling, broken, yet somehow lighter. For the first time the weight of silence had lifted, though its cost burned through her soul. The hall still shook with Naomi's confession, but now Marcus's voice filled the silence like thunder. "You wore her name," he said, his tone cut sharp yet trembling beneath its weight. Naomi's hands clutched her gown, her tears streaking down without restraint. "I had no choice," she cried, her words breaking into shards of anguish. Marcus's jaw tightened, his blind gaze piercing like a blade. "You had a choice between silence and truth, and you chose silence." Naomi's chest heaved, her heart raw. "Would you have loved me if you knew from the start?" she shouted, her voice echoing against marble walls. Marcus's lips curved with torment, his silence sharper than words. He whispered finally, "I do not know if I can love what was born from lies." Naomi stumbled to her feet, her voice shattering with desperation. "I am not her shadow, I am me." Marcus turned toward her, his face carved in fury and ache. "You let me touch lies and call them truth." Naomi's heart thundered, her voice rising. "Every touch was real. Every breath near you was mine, not hers." Marcus's hands trembled as he gripped his cane tighter. His chest heaved, rage colliding with the vulnerability in his tone. "You have burned trust into ash." Naomi reached for him, but he pulled back, his blind gaze fixed on the storm outside. "You chained me to deception," he whispered. "And still you ask me to feel love in the fire." Lightning illuminated the room as Marcus's voice grew raw. "I gave vows to a ghost, Naomi." She stepped closer, trembling, her voice cracking. "But you kissed me, not her. You held me when I shook with fear, not her." Marcus's breath caught, his fury wavering under the weight of her truth. "You stole her name but gave me your soul," he muttered, torn between rage and yearning. Naomi's tears glistened like glass shards. "I only wanted to survive," she whispered, her words trembling with fragile honesty. Marcus's fists loosened around his cane, his heart warring against betrayal. "Survival does not excuse chains," he said, though his tone broke at the edges. Naomi's voice erupted like a wounded cry. "Then hate me, Marcus. Hate me for wearing her face, but do not deny what you felt when you touched me." Marcus's chest rose sharply, his fury quaking into something softer, more dangerous. He whispered with torment, "I touched truth beneath lies, and it broke me." Naomi's sobs shook her body, but she stood defiant in her ruin. "I am more than the lie they forced on me," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. Marcus's blind gaze fixed on her like sight itself had returned, piercing, unyielding. "You want love born in fire," he said, his voice thick with grief, "but flames leave scars no vow can heal." The thunder roared as Marcus stepped forward, closing the space between them. Naomi's breath stilled, her heart pounding like a trapped bird. His hand rose, trembling, until his fingers brushed her face. Naomi froze, her tears spilling as his touch traced the truth of her cheek. His voice broke into a whisper. "This face, it is not hers. It was always yours." Naomi sobbed, collapsing into his hand, her voice shattering. "Then see me, Marcus, even if the world never forgives us." His jaw trembled, his heart caught in a storm of love and betrayal. "I see you," he whispered, his touch lingering with both fury and aching tenderness. The storm outside screamed their truth, wild and unyielding. The storm eased into a haunting drizzle as Naomi sat alone in the library, her body trembling under the weight of shattered vows. Marcus entered, his steps deliberate, his cane tapping softly. "You broke me," he said, his tone low but steady. Naomi's head dropped into her hands, her voice cracking. "I broke myself too." He paused, his blind gaze fixed on her as though he could see her shattered soul. "Do you want forgiveness?" he asked. "Or do you want freedom?" Naomi lifted her tear-stained face, her heart torn. "I want neither if they mean losing you." The fire hissed in the silence, filling the space with heat that clashed against their frozen pain. Marcus stepped closer, his voice carrying quiet thunder. "Trust is not rebuilt in whispers, Naomi." She rose unsteadily, her tears glistening in the firelight. "Then let me earn it in scars," she whispered, her words fragile, yet resolute. His jaw tightened, torn between anger and yearning. "Do you think love survives betrayal?" Naomi's chest ached, but her eyes burned with fragile hope. "Love survives storms, even when roofs collapse," she said, her voice trembling but unbroken. Marcus turned his blind gaze toward the fire, his silence louder than her plea. In that silence, Naomi felt her heart bleed, yet dared not turn away. Later, Naomi stood at the balcony, the drizzle kissing her skin. Marcus followed, his cane tapping against stone, his voice softer now. "Why did you carry her name?" Naomi's breath fogged in the cool night air. "Because I was nothing without it," she whispered. He turned toward her, his blind gaze fixed on her trembling voice. "You were never nothing," he said firmly, his words cutting through her shame. Naomi's tears blurred the world as she reached out to him, her hand hovering in the air. "Then let me be seen as me," she pleaded. His silence stretched, but for the first time it held no fury, only aching thought. The night deepened, and Naomi's mother reappeared, her voice sharp as ever. "Do not forget why you wore her name," she hissed. Naomi's chest tightened, but she stood firm now. "I will no longer carry your chains." Marcus shifted closer, his presence anchoring her words. Her mother's face hardened, but beneath her polished control, cracks spread. "You will ruin everything," she snapped. Naomi's tears glistened, but her voice did not shake. "I already lost everything. All that remains is truth." Marcus tilted his head, his voice calm, but edged with finality. "Truth has already broken walls. Let it free her too." When her mother left in silence, Naomi collapsed into Marcus's arms, her sobs muffled against his chest. His hand hovered before slowly, resting on her back, trembling with conflict. "You chose truth over chains," he whispered, his voice cracked with both pain and reverence. Naomi clung tighter, her words trembling through her tears. "Even if you never forgive me, I would rather die as Naomi than live as Elena." Marcus's blind gaze lifted, his lips parting with a breath heavy as the storm. "You are Naomi," he said quietly, his voice a vow of recognition, though not yet of love. Her body shook, but for the first time she felt seen. Dawn crept over the mansion, gray light spilling through heavy curtains as Naomi stood by the window, her gown wrinkled from a sleepless night. Marcus entered silently, his blind gaze lifted toward her presence. "Morning feels colder than night," he said quietly. Naomi's voice cracked. "Because truth left nothing warm behind." He moved closer, his cane tapping gently, his jaw tight with unspoken torment. "You gave me honesty, but it came wrapped in fire. Naomi turned, her eyes swollen with tears. If fire is all I had, then I gave you everything. The silence stretched, heavy with grief and longing. Marcus exhaled sharply, his voice trembling. Then we must decide if ashes can breathe life again. Naomi stepped forward, her voice fragile yet steady. I will not beg for forgiveness. I will only ask you to see me as I am. Marcus tilted his head, his lips parting as if to speak but closing in restraint. I already see you, he whispered, his tone fractured, and that truth haunts me. Naomi's tears slipped silently, but her spine straightened. Then let me haunt you as myself, not as her. His chest rose sharply, his blind gaze lifted to the ceiling as though reaching for air. The storm had gone, but the house still carried its echo. Both stood trembling, two souls stripped bare, waiting for the choice that would define their ruin or rebirth. Later, in the garden damp from rain, Naomi walked slowly along the stone path, her hands grazing the wet roses. Marcus followed, guided by his cane, his steps hesitant but steady. You remind me of storms, he said, his voice low. Naomi looked back, her eyes glistening. Because I destroy? Marcus paused, his expression tense. Because you survive. Naomi's chest burned, her tears threatening to fall again. Survival feels like drowning when you lose what matters most. He reached toward her voice, his hand trembling in the mist. Then take my hand if you want to rise. She hesitated, her heart pounding, then slowly placed her hand in his. Naomi's hand trembled in his, her voice breaking. You should cast me away. Marcus's grip tightened gently, his blind gaze steady. I should, but my heart does not obey. Naomi's tears blurred her vision as she whispered, then we are both prisoners of love. He drew closer, the air between them heavy with unspoken fire. Love can be prison, he said, or it can be the key. Naomi's chest ached, but hope flickered faintly in her eyes. Then give me the key, she whispered, her words fragile as breath. Marcus exhaled, his lips parting in silence, the decision weighing heavier than the world itself. They stood beneath the breaking sun, silence more powerful than vows. Marcus lifted his hand to her face once more, tracing the truth of her skin. His voice broke. I see you, Naomi, only you. Her sobs echoed through the garden, but they carried both pain and release. She whispered, even if scars remain, let them tell our story. Marcus's blind gaze softened, his lips trembling with words unsaid. Then let them, he breathed, his tone both surrender and promise. As the sun pierced through clouds, they held on to each other like survivors of the same storm. The world beyond might never forgive, but here, in this fragile dawn, they had chosen each other.